I have sinned against you, my Lord, and I would ask that your precious blood would wash and cleanse every stain until it is in the seas of God's forgetfulness.
After decades of lawsuits, sex scandals, and silence, Jimmy Swaggart finally spoke. His rise to the top of televangelism was extraordinary, but his fall was just as dramatic. For years, he stayed quiet, giving no closure or answers to his congregation. Then, just weeks before his death, he stepped onto the pulpit one last time and revealed everything. The truth stunned his church. What did he confess? And how will it change the legacy he leaves behind? Join us as we uncover Jimmy Swaggart's final revelation. Signs of the final days. Just before the health crisis that would eventually end his life, 90-year-old Reverend Jimmy Swaggart stood before his congregation and spoke with surprising honesty. He told a few stories, light, personal ones, but looking back now, they sounded more like quiet signs of something bigger. He talked about how he had been feeling tired and out of breath. Concerned, he went to see a heart doctor. The doctor gave a quick check and said it was just old age. Swaggart later saw his regular doctor, hoping for a more precise answer. But again, he heard the same thing from old age. Then came a strange moment while reading the Bible in church. The words on the page became blurry. He couldn't see properly. He wasn't sure which eye doctor he saw, but it didn't matter. The result was the same. The blurry vision, too, was blamed on old age. Swaggart joked about it with a smile, saying the doctors could at least act like they cared a little. Still, the preacher pressed on. He asked his secretary to print the Bible in huge letters and continued leading services like always. But days later, everything changed. On June 15th, his son Donnie and grandson found him unconscious at home. Jimmy Swaggart had suffered a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital. He was moved to intensive care, where he remained in a coma. During a special service at Family Worship Center in Baton Rouge, Don Swaggart told the church that the family was now facing the end. He admitted they were preparing for the worst and trying to make difficult choices. Still, he thanked everyone for their support and prayers. A post on Jimmy Swaggart's official Facebook confirmed no real improvement. Then, on July 1st, the Swaggart family shared the news everyone feared. Reverend Jimmy Swaggart had passed away in Baton Rouge. He was a towering figure in American televangelism. He preached for over 6 decades, built a global ministry, and never stopped believing, even when his body started failing. To understand how much he meant to millions, we now look back at where it all began. Following the right path. Long before he became a global televangelist, Jimmy Swaggart's story began in a small Louisiana town. Born on March 15, 1935, in Faraday, Louisiana, Jimmy came from humble roots. His father, Willie Leon Swaggart, often called Son, was a fiddle player, a preacher, and a local sharecropper. His mother, Minnie Bell, came from a similar background. Her father was also a sharecropper. The Swaggart family tree wasn't just close-knit, it was tightly woven. Cousins married cousins, in-laws became blood relatives, and the entire clan grew into one big, complicated family. Among that family were 2 other names that would one day make headlines. Jimmy was a cousin of rock and roll legend Jerry Lee Lewis and country music star Mickey Gilley. But unlike his famous relatives, Jimmy chose a very different path. In 1952, at just 17, he married 15-year-old Frances Anderson, a girl he met in church while playing music with his father. They had 1 son, Donnie, and very little else. With barely enough money, Jimmy took on small jobs and sang gospel songs in churches across Louisiana. Life was tough. At times, the Swaggarts had no home of their own. They slept in church basements, borrowed rooms, and run-down motels. His preaching brought in just $30 a week, barely enough to survive. But even when money was tight and hope was thin, Swaggart stayed focused on his calling. One of the biggest turning points came when Sam Phillips, the famous Sun Records producer behind Elvis Presley and Johnny Cash, approached him. Phillips wanted to launch a gospel division and offered Swaggart a deal. His cousin Jerry Lee was already making $20,000 a week with the label. The offer was huge, but Swaggart turned it down. He believed he was meant to preach, not perform. That one decision shaped the rest of his life, as what followed was a slow but steady climb, from backroad sermons to global fame, from trailer to television. With passion and a donated flatbed trailer, Swaggart hit the road full-time in 1955. He traveled across the American South, preaching in open fields, small churches, and anywhere people would listen. Slowly, a movement began to grow. Revival meetings turned into large gatherings. His voice started to carry farther than anyone expected. By 1960, Swaggart took his message beyond the stage and into the studio. He began recording gospel albums and airing them on Christian radio. A year later, he was officially ordained by the Assemblies of God. And in 1962, he launched his radio ministry. As his audience grew, so did his vision. In the late 1960s, he founded a small church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the Family Worship Center. It didn't look like much at first, but it would later become the headquarters of a global ministry. Then came television. Swaggart started a weekly 30-minute TV show on local Baton Rouge stations in 1971. That same year, he bought a local radio station, WLUX, and turned it into a platform for preaching, gospel music, and inspirational programming. It was a smart move that helped his message reach thousands more. Over time, he sold most of his radio properties to focus on a new frontier, television. By 1975, Swaggart's show had spread across the country. He realized that TV wasn't just another tool, it was the future. In 1978, he extended the program to a full hour. He launched a daily weekly broadcast 2 years later, mixing Bible lessons with music. On weekends, viewers could tune in to see full services from Family Worship Center or one of his crusades held in major cities. The response was explosive. By the early 1980s, Jimmy Swaggart's voice was echoing in living rooms across America. His fiery sermons and gospel music filled the airwaves, reaching every corner of the country on over 250 TV stations. But as his fame skyrocketed, so did the shadows around him, and the controversies weren't far behind. Scandals in the church. During Mozambique's bloody civil war, Swaggart's ministry was accused of supporting a rebel group called Renamo. The group had a brutal reputation and was blamed for horrible crimes, including attacks on innocent civilians. Reports claimed Swaggart's ministry didn't just send prayers. They allegedly sent cash, supplies, and boxes of religious books. In 1985, when Zimbabwean troops raided a Renamo camp, they found Portuguese copies of Swaggart's gospel books left behind by fleeing fighters. In 1988, the ministry's name reappeared during a trial in Australia. Swaggart's organization was linked to Renamo through another church group. But that same year, headlines in America focused on a completely different scandal that didn't involve Africa. This one started in a hotel room in Louisiana with a prostitute and ended in the fall of one of the most powerful preachers in the world. But before that, there was Marvin Gorman. Gorman was another rising star in the Pentecostal world. He built a large church in New Orleans, had a strong media presence, and grew his congregation from just a few hundred to nearly 5,000. His ministry was gaining serious attention, and Swaggart noticed. In 1986, Swaggart called Gorman to a private meeting in Baton Rouge. There, he accused him of having affairs with multiple women. Gorman denied the claims, but the fallout was massive. Gorman later filed a lawsuit claiming Swaggart tried to destroy his career out of jealousy. In court documents, it was revealed that a judge had thrown out the case, saying it was a religious matter. But Gorman pushed forward with an appeal. Why would Swaggart go after a fellow preacher? Those close to the situation believed it came down to pride. Gorman's ministry was growing fast, maybe too fast for Swaggart's comfort. One of Gorman's friends put it simply: Jimmy feared Marvin might outshine him. While all these were happening, Jim Bakker, one of the biggest names in televangelism of that time, had Marvin Gorman on his PTL network and stood firmly by his side during the public fallout. As tensions grew, Bakker responded by cutting Swaggart off the PTL network in October 1986. According to a PTL staff member at the time, this was done to stop Swaggart from making sarcastic remarks about the network. Along with Swaggart, Bakker also removed John Ankerberg, a preacher from Tennessee who had joined Swaggart in calling for an investigation into Bakker's sex scandal. Swaggart did not stay quiet. After being dropped from PTL, he aimed at Bakker, calling him a cancer on God's kingdom, and mocking preachers he accused of caring more about their appearance than the message. Swaggart also filed official complaints with the Assemblies of God leadership, and that was when Gorman lost everything. Gorman finally admitted he had an affair years earlier, but claimed most of the accusations were false and meant to destroy him. However, church authorities had accused him of multiple affairs and inappropriate behavior with women who came to him for help. One report described his actions as deeply sinful and damaging. Gorman insisted that he was never shown the evidence and that the women involved had not filed any complaints. He was stripped of his credentials and kicked out of the denomination. In response, he sued Swaggart for defamation, and the case ended with a private settlement of nearly $2 million. In one of the strangest parts of Gorman's lawsuit, he pointed to a bizarre testimony against him. A New Orleans minister said that while performing an exorcism on a deaf woman, the demon he cast out spoke in a man's voice. The minister claimed it was the voice of Marvin Gorman. He said he had heard Gorman speak often and was sure it was him. According to the minister, the devil said Marvin Gorman had been hurt, and now he would strike back by causing damage to churches in the area. By March, another blow hit the televangelist world. Jim Bakker resigned from the PTL ministry. It happened after the press revealed that he had paid Jessica Hahn $279,000 in hush money to cover up a sexual encounter from 1980. That one report unraveled a bigger financial scandal that destroyed Bakker's empire. Jimmy Swaggart used that moment to present himself as the last man standing. He spoke out against Bakker's lavish lifestyle and the prosperity gospel. On CNN, he said preachers should live clean lives, free from even the slightest trace of scandal. He admitted he had fallen short many times and had cried out to God in repentance, but he was clear he had never had any affairs. When asked how he felt about the criticism from other pastors, Swaggart said he didn't care about public opinion or money. He believed a faithful preacher only needed to follow what God told him, even if it meant suffering or public shame. But Swaggart's fall was coming fast. Marvin Gorman had promised revenge, and he kept that promise. The fall of the mighty Marvin Gorman was determined to get even. He sent his son, Randy, and son-in-law, Garland Bilbo, to start following Swaggart around. They had heard rumors that Swaggart was frequently seen on a local prostitution strip, Travel Inn, a cheap motel in Metairie just outside New Orleans. After making their findings, they discovered the woman, Deborah Murphy, whom Swaggart frequently patronized, so they planned a sting operation. Their target was Room 7. That's where they spotted Jimmy Swaggart with Deborah Murphy, a local prostitute. The two men took photos and then called Gorman immediately. Swaggart entered the girl's room, but left almost immediately, likely because he heard he might be being watched. When he got out, his car had a flat tire. One of Gorman's men had flattened it. So there he was, trying to fix his tire and get out of the parking lot. And not long after, Gorman showed up in person. At that point, Swaggart knew the game was over. He got into Gorman's car. They had a long discussion. Swaggart admitted everything, that he had struggled with this problem for years. He begged Gorman for forgiveness and pleaded with him to keep the story quiet so he wouldn't lose everything. According to one biography, Swaggart agreed to apologize to Gorman and help restore him to the Assemblies of God. Gorman promised to stay quiet if Swaggart admitted he had lied about Gorman's past. But almost a year passed with no apology. Gorman finally delivered a letter to Swaggart, warning that time was up. Swaggart never replied. On February 16, 1988, Gorman went to James Hamill, one of the top leaders of the Assemblies of God, and revealed everything. The church responded by suspending Swaggart's TV broadcasts for 3 months. After the story broke, Murphy agreed to take a lie detector test given by a polygraph expert from the New York City Police Department. She failed. The expert said she was dishonest about being paid to set up Swaggart or making up the story for money. She initially offered to sell her story to the National Enquirer for $100,000. When the Enquirer backed out, they ran a different piece, quoting Swaggart's relatives who said they were worried about his health. Murphy later blamed the failed test on the cocaine she had used the day before. She later shared her version of events in Penthouse magazine. Then came the moment that shocked the world. On February 21, 1988, Swaggart stood on live television and cried as he spoke to his family, church, and millions watching from home. He didn't say precisely what he had done, but begged forgiveness. At first, the Assemblies of God gave Swaggart a 2-year suspension for sexual misconduct, but when his 3-month ban ended, he went back to preaching. Church leaders felt he wasn't truly repentant. They defrocked him, stripped him of his ministerial license, and cut all ties. Numerous TV stations and Christian broadcasters that once carried Swaggart's program decided to drop it. The massive donor income fell sharply. Jimmy Swaggart Bible College saw its student enrollment plummet after 1988, forcing deep cuts in programs and staff. In short, the empire that had taken over 20 years to build seemed to crumble in months. Now, despite the blow, Jimmy Swaggart did not quit preaching. He became an independent preacher and built his ministry in Baton Rouge. From there, he launched the Sun Life Broadcasting Network, which now airs across the US and other countries. The unrepentant preacher things were starting to look better for Jimmy Swaggart. After the 1988 scandal, it seemed like he might slowly rebuild what he had lost. But in 1991, another scandal hit, one that would destroy his image for good. In October of that year, Swaggart was caught again, this time in California. A police officer had pulled him over for swerving on the road. Inside the car was a prostitute, along with a pile of pornographic material that Swaggart had tried to hide under the seat. The story broke quickly, and the news spread fast. People who had forgiven him once felt betrayed all over again. But this time, Swaggart didn't act like the same man who cried on national TV in 1988. He didn't apologize or break down in tears. Instead, he stood before his church in Baton Rouge and gave a short message. He told them that what happened was between him and God, and that it was none of their business. The room went quiet. Even his son Donnie was shocked. Donnie soon announced that Swaggart would step down to get help. But it was too late. Most TV stations that were still airing his program dropped him immediately. By the end of 1991, Swaggart's days as a major televangelist were done. His once massive audience shrank to a small group of loyal followers in Baton Rouge. These back-to-back scandals didn't just affect Swaggart. They added to a growing public distrust of televangelists. Around the same time, preachers like Jim Bakker, Marvin Gorman, Peter Popoff, and Larry Lee were also exposed for their misconduct. A New York Times editorial captured the mood, saying the swagger was gone from Swaggart's step and that the mighty had truly fallen. After the second scandal, Swaggart stepped away from the national spotlight, leaving much of the ministry's leadership to his son, Donnie. For a while, he stayed out of the pulpit, but through the Sun Life Broadcasting Network, he found a way back. Swaggart began preaching weekly again at Family Worship Center in Baton Rouge, with services aired on television, radio, and online. By creating his own media platform, he no longer relied on outside networks to share his message. The ministry became a whole family effort. Donnie preached regularly, Francis took to the stage, and eventually even Swaggart's grandson joined the lineup. They continued this way until Jimmy's death. Do you believe Jimmy Swaggart ever truly repented? What's your honest opinion about televangelists? Are they spreading faith or just chasing fame and fortune? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moves you, please like, share, and subscribe. There's more ahead. Click the next video on your screen to keep the journey going.